America.
The small, lay a big hit and pass a kick the ball. This game is for us all. From Seattle down toward the Keys, this game is you, this game is me. Cats, dogs, and steer, even a tree. This game is America, so sing it loud with me. College football forever. College football forever. Downtown LA, Starkville sit. 1 week you're up next, take a dip. Run the rock or let it rip. This game is America. All say, can you sing it with me?
We just stepped on her face with a hot-tail broken across her nose. Whoa, Nelly!
College football forever. College football forever. College football forever. College football forever.
College football is a year-round discussion with these two. Here's JC and Morgan. Mike Morgan of ESPN and JC Shurburtt of 24/7 Sports have you covered, beginning right now.
What a way to come in. Good morning and welcome, everybody. It's the best anthem in college football history, written by JC Shurburtt, composed by an anonymous guy with a pleasant voice, right?
The house band, man.
The house band. Yes, the JC and Morgan house band, available for weddings and bar mitzvahs. Please give us a call and we will farm them out to anybody and everybody. Another great week of college football. 10 weeks in the books. Can you feel it? Can you feel it? We've only got 4 left before we start talking about conference championship games and playoffs. We're going tempo today. We're going rapid fire. We're gonna try to do this bad boy in about an hour's time, if we can. He is JC Shurburtt. I am Mike Morgan. Our fearless producer behind the proverbial glass is the Mad Dog, Phil Mullinex. Coming up, the JC5, Group 5 John, all the normal bits and pieces of what is another award-winning installment of JCM. 3 of the top 11 teams lose in college football. Texas A&M gets worked over on the road in Columbia, South Carolina, 44-20. They got completely blanked in the second half to a defense we've been harping on and praising pretty much all year long on this particular program. Penn State does what Penn State does under James Franklin in big games. They lose on a fourth and goal from just inside the one. They call a pass play with Drew Aller. I just don't understand. I don't understand what that was all about. They had every opportunity to win the game, and again, they did James Franklin things in a massive game. So that that novel hasn't changed at all. I mentioned 3 of the top 11. Well, number 11 was Clemson, and they lose at home to Louisville, just as so many of the national pundits were starting to really become enamored with Clemson because they got worked over by Georgia in week 1. I was like, okay, blow them off. And then all of a sudden they started playing well. And all of a sudden Cade Klubnik started playing well. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, maybe they figured some things out. And then you lose at home to Louisville, 33-21. Huh?
Yeah.
That's a hard one to figure out. It really is. Within the SEC, Florida, Georgia, that actually was a good game. The final score of 14 points would make you feel like it was a little more of a blowout. If DJ Lagway doesn't get hurt, I don't know. That thing might have been very interesting. Carson Beck has now thrown multiple picks in 4 out of the last 5 games. And it's a problem that doesn't seem to be going away. Georgia is good enough to overcome it, and they did overcome it, but that is certainly a concern moving forward. Oh, by the way, they will be on the road. I'll actually be at this game in Oxford Saturday at 3:30. Ole Miss blew the doors off Arkansas 63-31. Jackson Dart is still throwing touchdown passes. That was an absolute thumping, if you will. And elsewhere in the SEC, Tennessee, don't sleep on the Vols. They beat Kentucky 28-18. They are 7-1, 4-1 in conference play.
Tennessee just keeps winning. They were my sleeper. I think they were your sleeper team too, Mike. We talked about it. I can't remember.
Then I started second guessing myself because the offense and Nico just I don't know what happened to Nico.
You'd expect them to line up and score a bunch of points like they usually do, but it's smart coaching by Josh Heupel. He knows he's got a young quarterback. He knows he's got a really good defense this year. You called that one. And he knows that they can run the ball with Sampson. Sampson's unbelievably good. He's nobody's talking about him. People still aren't talking about the Vols and it's unfair in my opinion because they're just winning a different way. That's what good coaches do.
Mm-hmm.
And Heupel's come a long way since the days of coordinator at Oklahoma, coordinator at Missouri. He's winning like he should. Kentucky kind of bounced back and played them tough. I didn't expect Kentucky to have much left in them because it looks like they've mailed it in, but they played them tough. But a win is a win in this league this year, and just survive and advance. And that's going to be an unreal atmosphere at the Grove in Oxford next weekend. Ole Miss had not scored more than 30 points in a single conference game this year, and then just rose up in Fayetteville. I feel bad about Sam Pittman, man. They had a game like that last week at Mississippi State where they ran it up, and then they just couldn't stand it. They had no answer for Ole Miss on offense on Saturday. But look, man, it's an unforgiving league. You mentioned South Carolina. The surprising thing to me this weekend was the offensive performances around the league. Even Florida, before Lagway got hurt, playing pretty solid football on offense. South Carolina, 200. If you'd have told me South Carolina's going to have 286 rushing yards against A&M, I'd have thought you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
Everybody would have. Lenore Sellers, legit guy,
Mm-hmm.
I think, as you watch him. And I want to say this about the Aggies, though. That game was kind of set up for them to not win. I thought. If you look at teams this year, when they get to that third straight week of having to get up unbelievably in the SEC, it's been happening pretty frequently. And they fought back after falling behind early and had the lead. I think they're a good football team, and they still control their own destiny, Mike, as far as getting to Atlanta. Got to win at Auburn, which Vanderbilt did. Got to beat Texas at the end, but that loss did not hurt them as much as we all may think as far as getting to the game in Atlanta in December. So that's something to consider right there moving forward, because one of Georgia and Tennessee, they're going to knock each other off, right? And so I think the Aggies still have the tiebreaker if they give Texas their second loss, et cetera, et cetera. So it should be an interesting race to see who gets to Atlanta this year and who makes the playoffs. Playoff poll comes out tomorrow night. It's going to be very interesting to see who all gets ranked. And it was another great weekend. I'm just like shrouded in jealousy now, Mike, because you get to go to that Ole Miss Georgia game next week.
It's going to be a lot. Yeah, it's going to be a lot.
That's awesome, dude.
It's going to be incredible. There's been some criticism, and Lane has shelled some of it out, and previous Ole Miss coaches have behind the scenes, that Ole Miss has to be less about the party and more about the game. Like the Grove's phenomenal and the Square's great and everything, but there's like high stakes on the line here, where that crowd needs to be absolutely juiced, and I think they will be for that game. I mean, there's just no excuse not to be. And that defense will be licking its chops against, again, a Georgia quarterback in Carson Beck that just has the yips right now. It's hard to believe. His NFL stock is crashing as we speak. He's got an NFL arm, but he keeps throwing it. These are inexplicable throws, many of them. They're not like deflected picks, or one of them was he got hit when he threw. Okay, but some of them are just like head scratchers. Like, you've been in the program way too long to be throwing that ball into double coverage or throwing that ball where there's just nobody there. There's a whole lot of what was he seeing on that play type of picks. But you're absolutely right. That'll be a tremendous environment and a great game that will go a long way. One of the few things that I think for me was predictable this year that's turned out to be true, and we're only in the first week of November. I thought there'd be no undefeated teams in conference, and with A&M falling, that's where we are. And it's not a well, the SEC is down this year statement, although some people, the Danny Cannells of the world will try and troll that point. It's the complete opposite. Is that the league there's too many good teams to run through 8-0. And when I looked at the schedules for teams like Georgia and Alabama and Texas, I didn't see a path to 8-0. So that's not a knock on any of those teams. It's certainly not a knock on the league. It is week in, week out, by far and away the most competitive conference in college football. And, adding Texas and Oklahoma, who eventually will be better, that just amplifies the point. I don't think we're going to have many 8-0 teams for a long time in the SEC. The question now becomes, when you cannibalize each other the way the teams in this league do, what are you left with? I don't think there's a path for 5 teams to get in the playoff now. I think you're looking at 4. If it was an easier path, then maybe you would have 5. But there's just going to be too many teams that have multiple losses to get to 5. So I think, for example, Alabama LSU this weekend, which will be the night game, I think that's a play-in game. That's for those of you that are still clinging so desperately that a 12-team playoff is a bad thing for college football, and yearn for the days of the BCS 1 versus 2, the mythical 1 versus 2. There's your playoff game already in November. The loser of that is most likely out of the playoff. Obviously, if Ole Miss loses to Georgia, they're out. If Georgia loses to Ole Miss, you're walking a fine line. I'm not saying you're out, but you basically have no margin for error at that point. So all these things, it's exactly what you want to see in college football. And to turn it back to Carolina for a moment, if they could have just split one of those, LSU, Alabama, they had both games. If Lenore Sellers doesn't get hurt, they beat LSU. If they don't make some shaky plays at the end of the Alabama game, they win the Alabama game. If you could have just won 1 out of 2, we'd be talking about Carolina having a path to the playoff as a potential 2-loss team. That's how crazy things can go sometimes in college football. And you mentioned Sam Pittman. Here are Sam Pittman and Billy Napier, everybody's Vegas odds to be the first 2 coaches whacked in college football, and they're both still hanging around. I don't know what that portends for the future. I don't know if Lagway's probably out for the year. I don't know if Billy gets a pass because of that. I don't think so. I don't think he does. And they could potentially lose the next 4 games, or 3 more, I should say. They should be Florida State. Florida State looks like they need a hug. They just want the season to end. but they go to Texas. They still have LSU. They still have Ole Miss at home, which could be the Lane Kiffin Bowl, the Lane Kiffin sweepstakes game, if you will. But it's just all zany. And meanwhile, Vanderbilt still keeps winning games. And, oh, by the way, and then we'll take a break and get to the JC5, because I don't know if you have some of this on there. Brian Harsin, who Auburn fans will probably remember as one of the worst hires in Auburn football history. Brian Harsin was 9-12 at this point. Hugh Freeze is 9-13. I would have hired Hugh Freeze too. I don't know many programs that wouldn't in that situation. Hugh Freeze was a hot, scalding hot name. And I get it. Like, they're still a ways away and they're recruiting great. But, man, a 7-point performance and a home loss to Vanderbilt. I know this is not your older brother's Vanderbilt, but it's still Vanderbilt, and that's still Jordan-Hare Stadium. And you had chances to win that game. Oh, and our pal Lincoln Riley. How about Lincoln Riley? He has won, in his last 16 games, he's won 5. He's 5-11. 5-11. I mean, that is just woefully bad. All the money in the country clubs and what didn't they give him? I don't think he's paying for groceries. I don't think he's paying for gas. He's probably got 3 Lambos in the garage. He's not paying for anything. He's making all this money. 5-11. What are they doing? It's crazy.
Yeah, man, that was a lot of craziness. The plane, it's just sad times in Auburn right now. I feel really bad for them because, like you said, we would have all hired Hugh Freeze. I mean, I was surprised, frankly, Tennessee didn't hire him when they hired Heupel. I mean, I thought he's a Memphis guy, so he's not really like Tennessee, but because that's kind of more toward Ole Miss. But Tennessee and Auburn were kind of his team. He would have taken that job. Luckily for the Vols, they made a good hire. But it's just surprising that Hugh Freeze and Lincoln Riley are not just losing, Mike. It's not just me. They're losing to teams that you never think they should.
Right.
Auburn. And Vanderbilt's a different animal this year, and they will be as long as the kill zone is there. And they play good defense too, man. Don't knock their defense under Clark Lee. They're a tough bunch of cookies, and they want to win. I mean, that group. Every time they take the field, they play inspired football, but you just don't expect that, especially after going on the road, beating Kentucky. You're like, well, they'll play until they can win this one, and then when they get Texas A&M in a couple of weeks, maybe they can play spoiler and maybe get to a bowl, but it's not happening. And then Southern Cal, I mean, losing to Washington, I mean that's a team from your league. I mean, that's not line of scrimmage or Big Ten or any of the reasons we've said that Southern Cal's losing. They just lost, man. And they lose games in strange ways too, dude. It's crazy, but
they have talent.
Yeah,
you can't say that they don't have talent.
Way more talent than they're playing right now. I mean, look, maybe in the new league with all the travel and all that, because I'm convinced that does affect teams, except it doesn't affect Indiana for some reason. Indiana doesn't give a flip. But I'm convinced it does affect teams sometimes, but even at that, you don't expect them to go into a season and lose to Minnesota, Maryland, Washington, who is clearly not the same team they were last year. They're rebuilding. Although they do have wins over Michigan and Southern Cal this year, the Huskies do. So there's something about Lincoln Riley as a head coach. And you'll hear me talk about this during the show today. Sometimes who you play matters. I think sometimes the ain't played nobody crowd gets a little bit too into it, right? Because comparing scores, you never want to do that. Anything can happen week to week. But you look at Clemson and what happened to those guys. They just flat out played a team that's not great, but that's so much better than the 6 other teams they played since Georgia that they got ambushed. You look at Southern Cal now having to go play grown man football. And every time they made Oklahoma when he was there play grown man football, they couldn't. They got their ass kicked. And so I think we're at the point now, and it's happened at Southern Cal too. All those times they play, Utah, they couldn't beat Utah. You know why? Because Utah is a very physical football team. They take the fight too. There's something about his teams. I don't want to say soft because those guys out there knocking heads and making tackles don't think that. Those kids don't think that. But their teams overall in general, since he was at Oklahoma, you run into a team that wants to out-physical you, you're either in for a war or you're going to lose with him. So I don't know what needs to happen out there. They've tried everything. That was their caged animal hire.
That was it.
So,
that was their caged animal hire, and I maintain Southern Cal is a volcano program. It's bound to erupt again, but so far it ain't happening.
I'll tell you this, though, man. Sometimes lately, the volcano programs that have been making caged animal hires, we've seen the next guy. Like A&M. Look, despite what happened Saturday night, I still think Mike Elko. I agree with Josh Pate. He was praising them all week, but said they're probably going to lose. And I think he was ended up being right. I still think he's the right guy for A&M, and he's the guy that came in after the caged animal. So maybe we're at the point where, sometimes, you have the caged animal hire, and most of the time it works out, but sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I think that game is less about what A&M did wrong and more about what Carolina did. They ran into a buzzsaw. Now, I don't know why you wouldn't play Connor Wigman. I mean, again, Reed is a guy who is a talented quarterback, but against that defense, if you're a one-dimensional quarterback, he can throw, but he's not a great thrower. I didn't see that matchup going real well. I was shocked they didn't play Wigman at all. But Elko's done a really good job overall, considering where he's come from. So that's not a caged animal hire. That's just a hire that's worked. Signetti's not a caged animal hire at Indiana. They just keep winning games. Like, it's not all about the name. It's not all about we fall in love with the hot name.
Yes, we do.
And very often the hot name is not the best guy for the job.
What's Tom Herman's record at FAU right now?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, Tom Herman just got smoked by Golish at USF. Talk about a hot name now. Golish is becoming one. But, yeah, Tom Herman, who I don't know if there was a hotter name. When Texas hired Tom Herman, he was scalding hot, sizzling hot. Everybody wanted a piece of that guy. Failed there and has not really done great things since then. So it's crazy to see how that all works. All right, we got to get to our first time out. We will come back. The highly coveted, the morale booster that is the JC5 here on JC and Morgan. Mike here for our friends at MG&A Wealth. It's never a bad time to have someone on your side for all your financial needs. You need a trustworthy partner who has a true understanding of your situation in order to help you with smart and practical solutions. Since 1984, MG&A Wealth has helped their clients manage not just their wealth, but their lives. Today, as a nationally recognized wealth management firm, their team of pros remains dedicated to serving your best interests with an emphasis on personal attention and customized solutions. MG&A Wealth has clients all across the country, and they all get results. Don't put it off any longer. Call our friends at MG&A Wealth at 954-289-9000. That's 954-289-9000. MGAwealth.com is the website. They do more than manage wealth. They help manage lives.
Morning, Carl. Usual?
Yeah.
Your oldest was in here the other day. Said the two of you took a trip down to my neck of the woods. How'd that go?
You might as well give me one of those Carolina cars while you're at it.
I knew I liked that one.
Yeah.
There you go, my friend.
Thanks.
Hey, Carl. Congratulations.
See you tomorrow, Freddie.
You bet.
We're passionate about making sure that the Nest and Wild mattress is the best it can be. Made well and made right. Right here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So how can we do all that? Work. Hard work. And that means something. The Nest and Wild mattress is a movement. It's a pride in where you come from and where you're going. So get comfortable, because this movement is just beginning.
We are back. It is JC and Morgan here on a Monday morning, presented in part by MGA Wealth, mgawealth.com for all your financial needs to enhance your portfolio, to set up your family for a great future. Call Sean today, mgawealth.com. Tell him you heard about it on JC and Morgan. Could be one of the most important phone calls you make in your lifetime. Real quick on chat row, Michael loves hitting me up with how much he hates the playoff. But Mike, your playoff love has just lowered the standard in college football. Garbage teams everywhere. No team has to be elite, and they know it. Mike, I love you, man. I mean, I'm not here to convince you otherwise. Like, you've got your opinion on that. It's been well stated. You hate the playoff. You think it's bad for college football. All good. Your Clemson could get a bye if they win the ACC. I'm not saying the playoff is perfect now. There are certain things I would do to tweak it. There's no doubt, but I'll take this over what we've had over the last 10 years or 20 years of the BCS any day of the week and twice on Sunday. Hopefully you'll still find joy in college football with an expanded playoff.
Clemson does not even – I don't think they control their own destiny anymore as far as getting to Charlotte. I think SMU and Miami are out in front with that.
100% they are, yes. Yeah.
So,
I
don't know.
I don't know if Clemson's even on the pool of relevance right now in the ACC.
SMU though, man, I'll tell you
they
this.
Crushed Pitt. I don't.
They did. I
didn't see that
sat there
coming.
and sung the praises of Pitt all week, and call it the JC curse, if you will. And they didn't. They became kind of who everybody thought they were at the beginning of the year. SMU played really good defense in that football game, Mike. I mean, and you talk to folks around the ACC, and we didn't, the ACC sort of is what it is, right? And it's been a bad since 2016 when I thought they had a banner year for their conference. It's not been pretty for that league. But I'll tell you this: when you talk about the ACC this year, and you talk to coaches about the expansion, they didn't really sweat on Pitt or Stanford or Cal. They were worried about SMU though, and the reason is SMU has deep pockets, as everybody said. In the NIL world, they're going to be able to compete for top players in Texas. They're not going to get all of them over A&M and Texas and Oklahoma and all the teams that recruit over there. But they're going to get their share to where they can be as good as, say, a TCU under Gary Patterson or the 1 year under Dykes or a Baylor under Art Briles. That's kind of their ceiling. And when you put that type of program in the ACC, that's a different ball game. That's a different level. And so they've done really well, I think. And Rhett Lashley, you mentioned Sam Pittman earlier. I think old Rhett's going to be in the mix at Arkansas if that job does open. So
100%.
I can tell you that right now.
Yeah.
And he's a guy Auburn wanted to run off when he was there under Malzahn. Let's have that Rhett Lashley. I just don't like the way he calls plays.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, a lot of good coaches are like that, though. Heupel got fired at OU, and then Dave Clawson, who is not having a good year this year. They're not good. Wake's not good this year. But he's won at Wake and really won significantly at Wake Forest. He got fired after 2 years at Tennessee under Fulmer. That was before Fulmer brought Cutcliffe back. And they called it the claw fence. And that was the biggest joke in Rocky Top for 2 years because they could not move the ball. The claw fence. Yeah. Then he goes to Richmond and wins at Wake Forest. Now, they weren't running that mesh thing they run at Wake, but it was it's just interesting sometimes how it happens. And
the unpredictable world.
We're in a world where Kurt Cignetti could probably lose two games this year and still be the coach of the year in the whole
national
country,
coach of the year. I don't think it's even close. SEC coach of the year has got to be Clark Lee. I would have to think. We have one listener said John Summerall will be Auburn's coach in 2 years. John Summerall is definitely a name out there. And Harrison, in my opinion, this has been one of the most fun seasons of college football ever. Complete chaos every Saturday. I'm right there with you. And the best is yet to come. I mean, this November, there's so many relevant games that are going to be a lot of fun to watch.
I'll address Mike one point for Micah. Micah, there's
Yeah.
no great teams anymore because Nick Saban's no longer at Alabama.
Yeah.
There's really been one great team, Georgia in most years, right? Georgia had and now
back-to-back really great teams where everything was dominant.
We're back to there'll be a cabal. There is a cabal still,
right?
But we're back to teams going up, teams going down every year. There's not going to be a run like Saban had at Bama. There's just not, because there's only one Nick Saban. I don't think anybody has the daggum sheer determination to do it like he does. He's a different cat, right? But I think that's actually better for the sport that one team's not dominant every year. I think the playoff gives teams access. If you want to say, and we'll move on from this debate, but if you want to say that the whole bye thing for the champions of the other leagues is unfair, and that the committee may squeeze a team with a pretty record in over a team with a brutal schedule that doesn't have a pretty record, I'm with you there. But I don't think the playoff is the reason that we don't have any good teams.
Well, I mean, if your beef is there's no great teams, then you're mad at the portal and NIL, which another listener pointed out. I mean, that's I'm not going to play the parity card, because it's not true parity. There's still, to use your term, JC, the cabal. There's still the same teams at the top. I mean, look at the polls. Like every year, you've got a story like Indiana, and that's great. And we'll see if they can keep it up. But for the most part, it's pretty familiar blood at the top, right? I mean, and some of these programs are programs that were down, but again, they're volcano programs like a Miami. There's no excuse for why Miami was as bad as they were. This year, they're pretty damn good. And why were they pretty damn good? Because they got Cam Ward. If Cam Ward went to Florida State, you think Florida State would be a one-win team? Absolutely not. You think Miami would be undefeated? Absolutely not. But they got him. And so, look, there's a lot of things I hate about the portal. Talking to coaches as much as we do, and understanding what's going on behind the scenes, where right now, at November the 4th, players are being contacted. We call that tampering, and being told, hey, if you come here for an extra $100,000, your life will be a lot better. So just keep that in mind. File it away. You know what I'm saying? And then before you know it, they're gone. A month later, whenever the period starts, JC, what is it? The week before
after the championship,
after the SEC championship.
Yeah, the Saturday moved up this year, so it's kind of early. And then the portal opens after signing day. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but yeah, it's different.
Yeah. All right, let's break in the JC5, shall we? We shall.
It's time for the top topics in the sport. We bring the JC5. Number 1.
All right, you had to feel bad for Florida and Billy Napier, and to a certain extent, but also in going and reviewing that game and reading some of the media in Florida's. Andy Staples, I guess, had a pretty interesting cut. Not Andy Staples, Matt Hayes. Those guys are both Florida-based guys, and I get them confused. I apologize, Andy and Matt. Matt Hayes in USA Today pointed out still a ton of coaching errors in that game. Penalties like 12 men on the field, that kind of thing.
Bad snap on field goal.
I'm going to put your Bull Gator hat on, Mike. I know you probably know some of them, being a Sunshine State native yourself. You kind of
I don't hang out with big money people like that, JC. I don't know any major boosters.
You are big money, dude.
Not these guys. The biggest booster I know resides in Oxford, Mississippi, because his name's actually on the stadium. But
nice.
but no, I know. I'll try to think like a big wheeler dealer that's cutting huge checks to the Bull Gator Fund.
Yeah, think like a Bull Gator. All right, so he lost his starting quarterback, who is promising. Lagway is going to be a very good player. And they were competitive. And that was a game they should have won. I mean, they had them down, or they could have won. I don't want to say should have. Don't want to say should have. You're probably not winning down the stretch against Texas and Ole Miss, and probably beat Florida State, right? It's going to be your fourth straight losing season. That hasn't happened since the 50s in Florida football. Do you cut bait, even if you know you may not get Lane Kiffin?
Well, that last part that you added to that question is what makes it tricky, right? Because I'm pretty sure the big money, from what I hear, talking to people that we know, people like Shane Matthews has been on the show, there is no question there is a group of big money people there that want Lane. It's first choice, Lane Kiffin. Who's your second choice? Lane Kiffin. Third choice. Did I stutter? Lane Kiffin. That's what they're getting. I don't know who choice number 2 is. So if they feel like they can get him, then absolutely they pull the trigger. If they don't, I don't know. I mean, this is where and like everything you said is probably going to come to fruition. Did you mention LSU in that group of that cavalcade of opponents as well? I mean, without Lagway and basically a walk-on from an Ivy League school, and I think it's Yale, they're not winning those games.
Yeah, their defense is probably playing about as good as it can. If they're not very good,
Right?
They played they've been inspired, but
yeah, and they're running the ball well, and they're fighting. Look, this is what you're seeing in Gainesville is far different than what you're seeing in Tallahassee. Tallahassee looks to me like a team that quit on their coach. And to me, that's not a knock on their coach. That's a knock on the kids for quitting on the season. I mean, that same coach took you to 13-0 last year. So what? He's not good enough to coach you now? You're gonna take your ball and go home and not play hard? That's pretty weak, if you ask me. You're not seeing that in Gainesville. Like, they play hard, they're just not that good. Even with a healthy DJ Lagway, they're not that good. Everybody, from what I'm told, likes Billy the guy. But we all know this, JC. It is not a business where nice guy gets you an extension or lets you keep your job. So I know the buyout is exorbitant, like most of them are in the SEC, with Jimmy Sexton being the shrewdest Gordon Gekko of college football. But I find it hard to believe that goodwill is going to be strong enough to keep his job at the end of the year if they lose 3 more in a row and have yet another losing season under Billy. And on top of that, as I always like to point out, it's not just losing, it's how you lose sometimes. It's 12 guys on the field. It's pre-snap penalties. It's a bad snap on a key field goal in a big moment. Oh, by the way, he's your primary play caller. There's been a lot of questions over the years about his play calling. So if you're going to ask me right now, first week in November, I'd say the wheels are already in motion by the big money boys, the machine that every school seems to have these days that truly makes these decisions much more than a guy in the AD chair.
Number 2.
All right. Speaking of potential replacements. All right. So if you're James Franklin, you probably still got a shot at the playoff. There's a lot for Penn State to play for. But, man, that one on Saturday. That just, I mean, they couldn't have started any better. Ohio State still struggling and grind. Boy, Ohio State kind of flipped a switch there, Mike, for a little bit in the game. It ended up being a pretty competitive game for a little bit, boy. And you're like, man, I get it. I get why this looks like the $20 million team. The game didn't end up that way. It got sloppy a little bit. But if you're James Franklin, right, you've kind of flirted with Southern Cal. I know James really likes Florida. He's fond of the Gators program. Do you get out? I mean, he's an Eastern Pennsylvania native, probably born to lead that program. He's won. Everybody in college football thought they were dead. Bill O'Brien kept it alive, and he nursed it back to health. I mean, they win. But as far as what the standard is there, it may be one of those things. They've been, like you said, they've been married too long, right? What do you think? Because if Kiffin turns down Florida, or if Lincoln Riley moves on from Southern Cal, I don't know why it would, but if he does, I could see James Franklin and his agent really trying to get him in the mix for those two. Would he be a worthy hire? And if you were him, would you go take another job, get a
So
fresh start?
that's the name you were nodding your head at a few moments ago.
Oh yeah. I gave you the head.
That's the first I've heard of that. I'll be honest with you.
Mm.
That's the first I've heard of that. We got to come up with a new term on our JC and Morgan glossary. The caged animal hire, the path of least resistance, the volcano program. We got to come up with a term for a head coach at a program that wins a lot of games, but doesn't win enough to keep the fan base happy, but doesn't lose enough to justify him being fired. That is James Franklin in a nutshell. For years, you could say it was Gus Malzahn at Auburn, because Gus would tease you. He'd beat Nick Saban 3 times. He'd win an SEC championship, but then he'd lose games where you're like, damn it, his offense is not 21st century compatible. We can do better. Let's go ahead and can him. And let's pay a lot of money. Let's call up Yellowwood and get a big fat check and get him out of here. That's what James Franklin is at Penn State.
It's a purgatory program.
I like that. Okay. Purgatory program.
Nice use of alliteration there.
I like it. I like it. So
program.
he is purgatory program coach, James Franklin, because everything you said is true. You can't argue with the fact that the guy wins a lot of games. You can't argue with the fact that he put in a good stint at Vanderbilt, which at the time was thought to be unheard of. That helps him get the Penn State job, obviously. And since he's been there, it's you can phrase it. If I'm his agent, I'm saying, look at his winning percentage compared to everybody else in college football. Look at what he has done here. And then if I'm big Penn State fan and I believe we should be playing for national titles again, I say, but look what he's done against Ohio State and Michigan. It ain't good. Look what he's done against top 5 opponents. It's worse. So I don't know. I think they are in a really tough spot. And I'm sure there's fans of other programs right now saying, well, I wish we had that type of problem where we're winning 10 games every year. Yeah. But at Penn State, you have every resource that Ohio State and Michigan does. And I'm watching that game, and I will say this. There is an obvious difference in talent. It's like a little bit at every position that Ohio State had on Penn State. A little bit at every position, and that adds up to 2 starters, right? A $20 million payroll at Ohio State, when you watch them, they look like a $20 million payroll. It's just speed, size everywhere. That being said, I go back to you have 4th down and goal, less than a yard to go. And you say, hey, Drew Aller, I know you've been struggling, but go ahead and throw the ball in traffic in the end zone on a 4th and goal because we can't run it from the 1-yard line. That is, and I know what somebody might say. Yeah, but he's not the offensive coordinator. I don't care. You're the head coach. There's been way too much of just delegating in coaching these days, where the OC calls the offensive plays and the DC calls the defensive plays, and I just sit here and decide whether or not we're going to go for it on 4th and 1. No. You've got a headset. You can go in there and say, no, we're not throwing it here. We're Penn State, damn it. We're going to play big boy football, and we're going to run the ball in, and we're going to go ahead and tie this game. They didn't, and it was catastrophic. I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but
yeah,
I'll just say I don't think that happens. I don't think they fire him, and I'm not sure if Florida would want him. I'm not sure if some of these other openings that come about are going to want him, because what you're going to have to ask yourself if you hire James Franklin is, are we going to have more talent than Penn State just had? And they didn't win the big games with James Franklin, and they had plenty of talent.
Yeah. He's a good recruiter. By the way, we have a priest in chat row that says, I don't know what purgatory means. It's not, well, the way I understand it, I just looked up the definition, and it may be I may be taking a little bit of license with it, but it's not heaven, but it's not hell. You kind of are in the balance and working your way towards something.
I'm not going to get into
but you're not there yet. Okay.
Right.
So that's my thing. So
I got your analogy.
I apologize if I didn't have the correct doctrine. We are very tolerant, religiously tolerant here on this program, and I apologize if I offended anybody. But I thought That was kind of my interpretation of it, even after reading the definition. So maybe I'll find something a little better.
We could come up with the JC 10 next week, and you can break down the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, so maybe I can. All right, next one.
Number 3.
All right, I mentioned Lincoln Riley earlier, so I'm not going to do that one. But I did want to say this: Texas A&M, looking down the road, still going to be a big game. I don't think we're going to get the repeat, but right now it's in College Station. Everything's kind of still out there for the Aggies. Let's say A&M wins out and goes to Atlanta, but they're 10-3 because they lose in Atlanta. Does that impact a playoff spot for them and maybe just some other teams from the league get in over them with a 10-3 record and a trip to Atlanta?
All right, I'm sorry. Rephrase that one more time. I
All right,
apologize.
let's say A&M wins out. Let's say they beat Texas.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah,
beat Auburn. They're 10-2. They go to Atlanta, but they lose to Georgia or LSU, whoever they play.
Okay, yeah.
And they're 10-3. Could they get left out of the playoff under that scenario?
Great question. Could, yes, but I'm going to guess no. I just think that it's kind of like when Greg Sankey went on the selection show. We were actually doing our show live at the same time. And he basically told everybody one of these is not built the same. And he was talking about Alabama versus Florida State, essentially. And lo and behold, Alabama got in, Florida State did not. I think when Greg Sankey and company speak and they remind you to get to the SEC championship game, you have to be one of the best teams in the country, not just in the SEC, that if you lose that, you're not going to be penalized for that. I would say they would still find a way to get in. Now, I'm not convinced A&M is going to get there yet because they could still lose to Texas. In fact, Texas will be a favorite in that game. I'm pretty certain. But under your hypothetical, I would say short answer, yes, they would get in.
Number 4.
I mentioned them earlier, the Hoosiers. Now check this out, Mike. I mean, they got a lot of run when game day was there, and they beat Washington, and that big score against Nebraska was impressive and all that. So they go to Michigan State. Michigan State, good, not great football team. Jonathan Smith is going to win games there. He's a really good coach. Came from Oregon State. They've won some, lost some, that kind of thing. So they get up 10-0. Adversity strikes. Next thing you know, it's 47-10 Indiana. Should they really be higher rankings wise than they are? Because they keep passing Texas and not tests. And it's not just tests. They're beating good football teams. Probably not beating the elite football teams right now, but they're beating good football teams, and they're beating them badly.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know how I feel about the polls. I don't pay much attention to them. I scanned it this morning. I couldn't even tell you where Indiana is off the top of my head. What are they, 8, 7? What? Yeah, your mic's I'm not sure where they are. I could look at it. But my point is that I think when it's all said and done, I mean, they're going to be judged getting to the Big Ten championship game if they're able to do it. And then what do they do when they get there? That's going to be the most. And of course, I'll start looking at polls Tuesday.
Yeah.
When the first playoff poll comes out. That's the one that matters. Go ahead.
Yeah. So they are. Oh my God! They ranked Louisville 25th. Wow. And Clemson's still in the poll. Wow. So, yeah, they're 8th behind Tennessee, Penn State, Texas, Miami, Ohio State, Georgia, and Oregon. I could probably make a case for them getting that spot that Penn State's got, but Penn State's only lost one game. Indiana's schedule has not been it's not the toughest. I mean, they haven't had to play Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, but hell, man, they're beating the heck out of everybody. So anyway, I just wanted to.
Well, their only knock is they haven't played the Big Three in the Big Ten, right? Am I missing one? Did they play? I don't even know if we call Michigan the Big Three this year because they're just not.
They have not played.
Not good.
They play at Michigan next week.
Yeah, and they're already, I believe, a double-digit favorite on that, if I'm not
as they
mistaken.
should be.
As they should be. So they hadn't played the glorified Big Three of the Big Ten, nor have they played. We got to expand that net to they haven't played Oregon, obviously. So people can justifiably say they've had the weaker Big Ten schedule, as we say all the time, whether it's the SEC, the Big Ten, or what have you. Not all conference schedules are built the same. It's not a round robin. You can't do it. You can't make everybody's schedule even. Oklahoma's schedule versus Missouri's schedule, night and day. Yes, they each played 8 SEC teams. No, it's not even close to being on par with one another. So people are taking some justifiable shots there, but Indiana's earned everything they've gotten. They got a quarterback that a lot of people didn't want, who's from Canada and went to the MAC, and now he's there. They've got a coach that was not a sexy name. What is amazing to me is that their defense holds up. Like, where are they getting out of the ball, JC? I mean, I doubt there's many 4 or 5 stars going to Bloomington on the defensive side of the ball. But damn, if they don't play great D.
I think that core of guys, which amazes me that James Madison has continued to win and had that win over North Carolina this year, which, by the way, hats off to Mac Brown for finally beating Florida State.
O'Marion Hampton we're going to look back when he is an all-pro running back in the NFL and go, how the hell did they not win more games in Chapel Hill? And by the way, Drake May looks great already in the NFL with the Patriots. Like, he's had some stud. Josh Downs, a wide receiver, making plays last night on Monday Night Football. He's had players. I don't know what happened in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, no doubt. But, yeah, so I get it. So that's something. I think those 13 guys Cignetti brought with him from James Madison, when you're part of a winning program like that and they win,
right?
It helps your other guys kind of up their level. And then their backup quarterback's pretty good, but Roark is Rourke or Roark, however you say it.
Rourke.
In the South, we say Roark. Anyway.
Yeah.
But he's a really good player.
In Canada, it's just Rourke.
In Canada, it's just Rourke.
Big
what's
Ten
that
country.
Yeah. So anyway, all right, let's roll with the last
5.
Number 5.
All right, so these two guys, I think we thought they would be coaching elsewhere by now, but they're still there. PJ Fleck and Matt Campbell. One had a big win this weekend.
Yeah.
Minnesota beat
Row your
Southern
boat.
Cal a couple weeks ago. Went down, beat a tough Illinois. I watch a lot of Illinois football because of my buddy, and I watched Minnesota go into Champaign and beat them 25-17, just using toughness and grit and whatever. That's why he wins. And then Matt Campbell had an unfortunate loss. Iowa State's probably still looking okay in the Big 12, but Texas Tech clipped them by a point. So these guys are cycling back up. Will this be the offseason where we see a Matt Campbell or a PJ Fleck move on to a different job finally?
If I'm Matt Campbell and the right offer comes along, I'm gone. And I, again, love the fan base at Iowa State. Ben Ames, they're terrific. But that is a really hard job. And I don't think he can take it any farther than he has. I don't think his stock is going to get any greater than it was a few years ago when he didn't jump on anything else. And look, they paid him very handsomely. It's not like he's a coupon coach. Iowa State paid him very well and gave him guaranteed money, and it'd be nearly impossible to fire him. All those good clauses that the Jimmy Sextons of the world put into contracts these days. But, and Fleck at Minnesota, that's another one. I could see both of those with a wandering eye, JC, because those are just really difficult jobs, and they're not getting any easier. Minnesota, with the expanded Big Ten, that job's never been harder. You got to battle the weather. You got to battle all kinds of stuff there. So, yeah, I could see both of them definitely flirting, depending on what's available. That's the other thing. It's like, okay, what's out there? You know, as Chris Rock once said, you're only as faithful as your options. Well, what are the options for those two guys? We'll see at the end of the year.
All right, that's it. Ron White also said that too.
Ron White also said that.
Anyway.
All right, we'll give them both credit. All right, we'll take a timeout. Final timeout. Group 5 John will weigh in on a little who are the top teams. This is going to be a really interesting race for who gets that G5 spot. Some people are even talking about the possibility of 2 G5 teams in the 12-team playoff. It's
way.
out there. I don't see it either, but it's out there.
People riot if that happens. There's
Yes.
there's no way on earth that. But yeah, okay. Sorry.
All right, we'll talk about it on the other side. It is JC and Morgan, presented by Nest and Wild Mattress. Yes.
Chat row, Steven, when did the Saints fire Dennis Allen? They just fired Dennis
this
Allen.
morning. Yeah,
they fired him this morning, so he's done.
Former Texas A&M grad assistant Dennis Allen.
Done Dundee and gone deep.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, the Saints are a mess, but that's the way they do it in the NFL. They just, if things aren't going well, you just fire the coach and hope for a better result. But they're going to be a mess all year long. Falcons are winning the division again. The worst division in pro football belongs to the Atlanta Falcons. An ode to them. We're in the Falcons hat this morning. Quick break. Back with a final segment after this. Mike here for our friends at MG&A Wealth. It's never a bad time to have someone on your side for all your financial needs. You need a trustworthy partner who has a true understanding of your situation in order to help you with smart and practical solutions. Since 1984, MG&A Wealth has helped their clients manage not just their wealth, but their lives. Today, as a nationally recognized wealth management firm, their team of pros remains dedicated to serving your best interests with an emphasis on personal attention and customized solutions. MG&A Wealth has clients all across the country, and they all get results. Don't put it off any longer. Call our friends at MG&A Wealth at 954-289-9000. That's 954-289-9000. MGAwealth.com is the website. They do more than manage wealth. They help manage lives.
Morning, Carl. Usual?
Yeah.
Your oldest was in here the other day. Said the two of you took a trip down to my neck of the woods. How'd that go?
You might as well give me one of those Carolina cars while you're at it.
I knew I'd like that one.
Yeah.
There you go, my friend.
Thanks.
Hey, Carl. Congratulations.
See you tomorrow, ready?
You bet.
We're passionate about making sure that the Nest and Wild mattress is the best it can be. Made well and made right. Right here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So how can we do all that? Work. Hard work. And that means something. The Nest and Wild mattress is a movement. It's a pride in where you come from and where you're going. So get comfortable, because this movement is just beginning.
All right, back with you here. It is the final segment of JC and Morgan. We want to thank everybody that tunes in each and every week. I know sometimes we make it a little bit unpredictable with the day and the time. With our schedules, we're just kind of forced to bounce around a little bit. But you folks have been loyal. You've been patient. You've been great. I know a lot of you don't get to listen live, but our numbers on the delayed listen, I guess you could call it, on Spotify, Twitter, X, Facebook, and of course YouTube, been great this year, and we really appreciate that. And we hope to continue to grow as we have over the last 7-8 years now. It's been, goodness gracious. Before we get to some of the key matchups in college football this weekend, G5 John chiming in with his top 10. Number 10, Colorado State at 6-3. Number 9, Georgia Southern. Number 8, Western Michigan. Go Broncos. Number 7, Western Kentucky. Number 6, JMU. The former Fighting Signettis are 6-2. Then Louisville at 5. Excuse me, Louisiana. Louisville has not been demoted. If anything, they've been promoted after the win against Clemson. Louisiana is 7-1. They're number 5. Number 4, UNLV. They get to go to Hawaii this week. What a cool trip. Number 3, Tulane. Number 2, Army, the one undefeated team in this group. They beat Air Force 20-3. They will take on North Texas in lovely Denton this Saturday. And number 1, Boise State. They beat San Diego State big, even though San Diego State, They practically put 11 men in the box. They basically said, Mr. Genty, you are not going to run on us. And Mr. Genty said, well, how about $149 and 2 more touchdowns?
Phew.
He's got 1,525 yards rushing, 20 touchdowns on the ground, 21 overall in 8 games. And a couple of those games, he didn't even play in the second half. He's certainly on my Heisman radar and a lot of others right now. You've got him, you've got Hunter, you've got Cam Ward, you've got Dylan Gabriel. There might be somebody I'm leaving out, but those are the 4 that right now I think are getting the most traction. Some quick lines for this weekend in the mega matchup. Georgia 2.5-point favorite in Oxford against Ole Miss. Bama a 2.5-point favorite in Baton Rouge against LSU. A lot of road favorites, which usually means some madness in college football. Colorado, a 3.5-point favorite in Lubbock against Texas Tech, and the Gamecocks are a 3.5-point favorite at Vandy. That game all of a sudden now becomes much more intriguing than it looked like at the beginning of the year for both teams, really. Indiana's a 14-point favorite against Michigan. We touched on that. Texas is a 21.5-point favorite against Florida, who will be playing with its third-string quarterback. Speaking of quarterbacks, Spurs Up mentioned Derek Carr approaching the most losses of all time as a quarterback in the NFL. Right now it's Brett Favre with 166. Yeah, and Derek Carr hasn't had quite the career of Brett Favre. It's one of those, it's kind of like what we were talking about with some coaches. They're just good enough to maintain employment. Well, Derek Carr has been just good enough to start a lot of games in the NFL, but he's not a Hall of Fame. He's not Brett Favre by any stretch of the imagination. So, kind of just random topics that have come up during today's program. JC, some final thoughts before we sign off.
Yeah, I wanted to throw this out. The revenue sharing numbers have been reported. That's coming. $20.5 million for each Power 4 athletic department. That'll be the cap. My understanding is most schools, 75% will be for football. The extra scholarships are going to be part of that too. So if you got $3 million worth of scholarships, it's going to take $3 million off of your 17.5 in some instances. So it'll be neat to see how all this kind of plays out. Glad they got that settled at least. I still tend to believe that lawyers are going to lawyer and there's going to be some more litigation. But, you know, for now, it looks like they're at least approaching something that makes a lot more sense with a rev share cap and then NIL on top of that. But my understanding is they did leave the clearinghouse thing in place. So it's got to be legitimate, quote unquote, NIL money moving forward. In other words, you got to have the value to make it. So,
well, you've got to have, like any other business would require an ROI, return on investment.
Yeah, exactly.
And what you have now is a ton of NIL deals that it's not about ROI, it's about wins and losses.
You get your ROI when they went on the field. So
exactly. Yeah.
We'll see what happens. I still think that's plenty of money for college football programs to spend on players. I think there's a point where you get to it and it's too much, and then you got another set of problems. I think we're seeing that in some cases this year, like at Florida State. Get a bunch of overpaid guys, and they don't have any motivation once you get past a certain amount of losses. And, so, but I think this is plenty. I think it's going to take care of everybody in a fair manner and move on from there. But I guarantee you there's going to be some lawsuits that come up, and don't forget about Title IX either. So,
as I understand it, that number is going to escalate.
Yeah, it is.
As TV money increases, that number will increase. I think at some point it'll be closer to 25 million per year. So yeah, I mean, there's right now, college football and college basketball are flooded with cash, flooded. So for all the problems and the grievances of years past from college athletes, I can't imagine that would be the case anymore. But I also don't think that NIL and collectives and all that other good stuff is going away anytime soon. Because if Ohio State figures that 20 give or take 20 million in payroll is going to help them win a national championship, you can be darn sure other schools will follow suit if they believe they can buy one as well.
Absolutely.
All right, that'll do it for us. For Mad Dog, Phil Molenax, for JC, this is Mike saying thanks again for tuning in to JC and Morgan. We'll see you next week. So long, everybody.